I would like to share my screen now and will share my presentation. I hope everybody can see now.
Yeah, it's visible.
Yeah, so let me start the presentation.
Yeah, please make it full screen.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
is it full screen now?
Yeah. Everything's fine.
Okay,
Yeah,
so once again, I would like to thank everybody onto this platform. Myself, Rahul Kashyap, as sir has introduced me, I'm working in Abu Dhabi as a senior prosthetist and orthotist. I'm a part of rehabilitation member over here. So I'm speaking something about on the topic barriers and ways to improve the learning outcomes for the children into this pandemic. So our main goal is like we don't have to leave anyone behind over here during the pandemic, especially for those children who's having disabilities uh, into this COVID-19 time frame. So as we all know that even in the absence of a global threat, children living with disabilities are the most vulnerable, marginalized, and stigmatized population. And in the context of COVID-19 has disrupted the life in every corner of the world, and it will likely disproportionately affect those with pre-existing vulnerabilities. So here we are speaking about those childs who are already marginalized, already been ignored into this COVID situation. Even before, like when the COVID wasn't in effect, so there also we have seen like these children are being marginalized on to some extent. So what we know is like the greater burden faced by the children living with disabilities means that we have to provide an additional efforts to ensure their need and their well-being is met when the transition to different pandemic phases. We all know like we have gone through the first phase, we are going through the second phase, and nobody knows where the third phase of COVID will be coming. So we have to prepare ourselves. We have to help these children's during this transition phase. So what we need to do over here is like we don't have to leave them behind. We have to take them together with us. So we have to come up with some programmatic actions that will need to address these specific challenges, especially during the pandemic and post-pandemic period, which is differentiated and inclusive of the policy responses, whether it's inclusive classroom or uh, teaching methods or going through virtual learning. So we will come to know all about this into the next few slides. Over here, we can see that some underlying health conditions which place children living with disabilities at higher risk for becoming infected with and developing severe illness as a result of COVID-19. So additionally, children living with disabilities, especially those with difficulties in the domain of hearing, visual, cognitive function, especially when we talk about, so their cognitive functions are a bit despaired, you can say, and they face an important barrier in the access of inclusive public health information and communication strategies, which are very crucial as a preventative measures and during the pandemic period. So what is coming. Access to these essential health service and wash facilities. This is very important over here. We have to know what is a wash facility. So we have to get them accessible with the water, sanitation, and hygiene of hand. So these things should be available there because many children living with disabilities live in a poverty context. And due to this intrinsic barrier, uh, accessing these services are very limited. Even the healthcare system in India is not able to deliver the inclusive uh, services, inclusive help to those children to access these wash facilities, which is very important. So I think each and every schools, societies, and everything should be there to get these facilities to the children, especially in this pandemic period. This will really help them because they are very vulnerable because their immune systems are not that strong compared to the normal child. So this is very important wash facility. So now coming on to school timing, what school is happening. So the schools are like working into the spaces right now. Many schools are closed until further notice. Nobody knows when the schools are going to come up with the fully fledged functioning and everything. So what we are seeing here is like the social distancing measures implemented by many countries have caused severe disruption to daily routine. In current scenario, if we are talking about July 2021, so schools has been suspended nationwide in 189 countries. That's a huge number we are seeing. So what is happening? The education pattern has been severely impacted. So for all those children, such closures may imply a lack of access to important resources, which is very important for their development, which is very important for their well-being. So for children with disabilities, especially remote homeschooling not only requires access to adequate IT resources and internet. We all know that in the remote areas, these facilities are not easily accessible to children, to vulnerable children. Common people can still avail. The schools, colleges do have these facilities in-house. But when we are talking about the schools are working in a space, we don't know where the schools are working. So in that condition, these resources are very important. Also, the availability of books, because you are working online, we don't know how accessible the books are to to the children's and other learning materials also, but also the access to specific assistive devices. Because when the child approaches to any of the rehabilitation center or any of the place where they are being assisted in terms of spatial education, so they don't get the access to a specific assistive device at home when they are trying to get the education through virtual learning. So access to specific assistive devices or a special education curriculum, which allows them for a continuous education at home, which also accommodates the child's specific learning needs. So we have to make sure that where we are lacking behind, since the schools are closed right now. Here is something which I would like to show you. So this is the total duration of a school closure. When we talk about India, so this is an Indian subcontinent over here. So we can see that it's been closed with 41 plus weeks, or you can say there's no data available that how many schools are closed and what's the duration of their total closure. This is a data recently published by UNESCO, and you can see how globally we all are impacted because of lack of uh, school access to schools because of the closure. Then when we see about the global monitoring of school closure caused by COVID-19, so this is a timing, you can see we are talking about the July month over here. You can see almost 31 million people are affected, especially children, those who are learners. And 1.58% of total enrolled learners are there. 8 countrywide closures are there. Again, we can see over here that the school in Indian subcontinent are partially open. Not everywhere it is working with the full-fledged facilities. They are working partially. Some of these, what we're talking about partially is like they're giving education online, virtually. So this is just a data which I would like to share with you. You can have this data, look onto this, that how severely we all have been impacted, especially those vulnerable childs. Now we all know that social distancing is a very important factor when, especially in the time of COVID-19. But how this is affecting, how this is impacting those children. So widespread concern about the effect of social isolation or social distancing on child well-being include increased anxiety. We have to really look on to here that social distancing is a very good measure which has been announced by the government of India or throughout the globe. But onto this impact onto the child, which increases an anxiety, which can also increase the depression, stress, and the concern about the exacerbation of relapse of pre-existing mental health issues. Because we are talking about children with especially abled people. So placing children at increased risk of clinically significant mental health issues, or could be alcohol or substance misuse, or even the suicidal tendency. So we have to be very careful when we are dealing with these children, especially those children which are having existing mental health dysfunctioning. They might be particularly affected by the disruption of services, isolation, and possible exacerbation of symptoms in response to the pandemic relation information and behavior. So this was like social distancing measure. Now let's come on to the quarantine constraint and overall burden faced by the families. So we all know that we are placing ourselves within the house. We are trying to quarantine ourselves. We are only coming out of our house when it is most urgently needed, you can say. So if you don't have any emergency situation, if you don't have any urgent situation, we all, or even the local authorities request us or advises us not to come out of our house. So what we are doing is like we are within the quarantine constraints. So this the burden those families face increased burden, and that also places children at increased burden. You can say increased constraint. You can say with disabilities, and at the increased risk of discrimination. So because they are within their house, they might be discriminated from the social context because they are not able to uh, allowed to go out and play with their friends, and they are not being exposed outside, and they could be exposed with the violent discipline methods in the household because they have to follow the house rules. They are not within the friends. They are always working with their family, within their family. They have to maintain certain discipline, which could be very irritating for the child, and it could lead to a violent tendency, violent behavior. The child might get irritated sometimes as well. So finally, ongoing monitoring efforts, which include surveys and censuses, have been severely affected as a result of the strategies to contain the spread of COVID-19 virus across the globe. In many countries, like National Statistics Office are suspending, public offices are trying to suspend, and which is they're trying to recollect the data from the population by using the alternative methods as well, like using telephone, internet-based data collection. So these things allows us to track and find those data and ease the burden onto the effect of the family and effect of the COVID-19. So they're concerned about the need to ensure that these approaches are inclusive of people with disabilities as well. Coming on to the next slide, so we know UNICEF is a very important body which deals with the disability. So the barriers and exacerbated burden experienced by children living with disabilities can be reduced if key stakeholders take appropriate action. So that's why we are talking about UNICEF over here. See, UNICEF has been traditionally been a privileged position all the time to deliver the prompt response in terms of data and evidence to guide the programmatic approaches that can address needs to children during this emergency and contingency situation. So we will come to know what UNICEF is doing. So since 2011, UNICEF, together with the Washington Group, have been working on the development of a comprehensive set of tools to strengthen the capacities of countries to collect, analyze, understand, use, and disseminate the data on children living with disabilities. Unless and until we are not able to collect those data of children living with disability, then we cannot act. So that's the reason UNICEF need to get the proper data even from the developing countries like India. So what they're doing actually? So they are doing like a module on child functioning, which reflects the current thinking around disability and allows to produce internationally comparable data on the percentage of children ages 2 to 17 years with functional difficulties, with functional limitations in the domain of communication, hearing, vision, learning, mobility, and motor skills, as well as emotions as well. So these are the parameters onto which UNICEF is trying to collect the data, and based on those data, they will be able to deliver the prompt response during this pandemic and emergency situation. So since it got released in 2016, this module is getting revised every year, I think. The module has been in use in many surveys, including the sixth round of multiple indicator cluster survey program, which was a very important program which shows the data of child being affected there. And based on the data, they are trying to help those children. They are coming up with a lot of funds and trying to come up with some new strategies and plans to help these children. What else UNICEF is doing is like they're undertaking dedicated data. They're collecting those data and analyze to identify specific vulnerabilities faced by children with disability that place them at heightened risk for disadvantaged outcomes. So these data analysis will allow to document and anticipate the capacity of pandemic to exacerbate current inequities affecting children living with disabilities. So generating disability inclusive evidence will help countries like India or other developing countries to be better equipped with transitioning into the post-pandemic period to inform differentiated policy responses for children living with disabilities. So what we are doing over here is like we are trying to collect the data and then we are trying to anticipate that what is about to come, and then we have to prepare ourselves. The same thing is like for a normal population, the government of India is trying to equip themselves with all machineries, technologies, like having fully equipped ICUs and equipped with all the ventilators and everything. So what we're trying to do is like this is all based on data. So data is very important over here. So now more than ever, a focus on disability measurement should be harnessed as to contribute to the reformulation of data collection methodology and to ensure that the newly collected information on the burden and the impact of COVID-19 does not leave children living with disability behind. So we don't have to leave them behind. That was my very first slide, that we don't have to leave those disabled children behind. We have to take them along with us. So now coming on to the learning and education, you can see the data what we have got over here that might shock you, that approximately 15% of the world's population, representing more than 1 billion people, live with disabilities. And that's a quite a lot number when we are trying to emphasize there. And 2 to 4% find day-to-day life challenging without assistance. So we have to come up with certain things uh, which has to help, which where people have to help these people, this percentage of people there. So disability is more prevalent, as we all know, in low and middle income countries like India, neighboring countries, Asian, African countries, than in high income countries because they're having their well maintained infrastructure. Uh, we all know that it is more prevalent in developing countries or underdeveloped countries. So disability, gender, nationality, ethnicity, poverty, and many other factors affect the internet access. When we are trying to go through learning and education via virtual platform, so we know internet access is an important tool which allows those children to interact with people like us, or people like all of us, where they can learn something, where they can come up with new strategies, new plan to sustain into this pandemic situation. So an online based high technology approach is not always ideal for creating an inclusive learning environment. How? We will come to know. Currently, because the lack of disaggregated data and information, it is very unclear that how many students with disabilities are receiving inadequate educational support as a result of COVID-19 population, COVID-19 pandemic. But I'm damn sure that there's a lot of children which are actually into the countryside area and they are more prevalent with disability, and they don't have access to internet or the current online technology, online based technology, where they can enroll themselves and learn the things. Now coming to the next slide, we can see that education need for students with disability in the current context of COVID-19. So around the globe, the lives of at least 1.5 billion students and their families have been significantly affected by the school closure, which is caused by the COVID-19 outbreak. We all know that government have responded by holding classes remotely, largely online, to ensure that the students continue to study. But we know that a lot of students still in right now, they don't have access to these remote classes via virtual platform. However, this measure does not address educational discontinuity and disruption for all students. So the estimate of 1.5 billion affected students does not take into account all of those who are marginalized, disadvantaged, or invisible in this educational system. We all know that this fancy online and high-tech based learning platforms and resources need to be available, and this needs to be accessible for all the students who are in need here, and they must be accommodated in order for government, schools, and teachers to ensure that the learners are not left behind during school closes as well as after school reopen, whether this occurs in 6 months or an year or even now, nobody knows about that when they is going to reopen with fully functional features or services. Even they open partially, the vulnerable child, I'm not 100% sure whether they will be allowed to enroll themselves in those educational systems, and they will be privileged to attend those inclusive classroom education and learning program. So now coming on to the core topic of mine, like what all barriers are there into the education through remote learning practices. So students with disabilities experience a variety of barriers to education, especially when we're talking about the virtual platforms. So for example, like in health crisis such as COVID-19, persons with disabilities are often provided with less help and inadequately trained teachers. This is a truth, and this is a real fact that all those child with disabilities are not actually provided with all the trained teachers right now. They are being allowed to expose with the trainers or untrained, inadequately trained teachers sometimes as well. More time and resources are required for the students with disability to actively participate in learning. This includes equipment. All the equipment means the having access to laptop or computer or television or anything, camera, webcam, internet access, and specially designed material and supports as well. Could be assistive device or could be an adaptive device which allows them to interact with the people like us or the spatial educators. So this makes learning more costly for the students and their families because they need to spend extra amount of money from their pocket to buy a laptop or to get an internet connection, to get the laptop with the webcam facilities, and to allow them create an environment within their house which is dedicatedly given to that child to use during the learning sessions. So students with disabilities are negatively affected by the classroom shutdown in additional ways. How? We will come to know. So they lose access to school meals because they are sitting at home. So they are not allowed to enter the school. So they don't have access to get those school meals. And they are also not allowed to play with their friends. They're not allowed to interact with their social life, which is equally important for the development and learning process for the children with disabilities. So another barrier is that many teachers lack these ICT skills, which is information and communication technology skill and knowledge. Because I won't say the teachers are responsible over here because we haven't faced these type of situation in the past. So we are trying to prepare ourselves, but still there's a long way to go right now where we can say that all our special educators, teachers are 100% equipped with these ICT skills and knowledges. There is a survey, there is a data which I would like to share with you, is like 40% of teachers in developing countries on an average lacks professional ICT skills. So you can actually analyze, you can understand that if these percent of this is a huge population, so you can say that half of the teachers, you can say in developing countries lacks those professional ICT skills. So how can they further escalate their learning process through these online virtual platforms? So we have to prepare ourselves first to learn these professional skills and then transmit these skills to our students. So they are unprepared, the teachers are unprepared to teach online, and they cannot ensure the students' engagement. We can see that the all if a teacher is teaching a session with, let's say, a student of 10 or 20 enrolled there, so they can't ensure their engagement because they don't know how to engage them. If you are into the classroom, you can actually scold them, you can actually threaten them, or you can actually plead them that okay, you have to focus, you have to concentrate over here. But that is not possible when you are taking an online classes, specifically for the students with disabilities, because you know they lack attention, because this is a part of their you can say disability. You can say those children with some disabilities, they lack certain attention. So what we can do, we have to know the skills to engage them while conducting an online platform session. You will come to know. I'll give you a brief introduction about how these can all be managed. So currently there's no available data on a special education teachers digital skills in developing on at least developed countries. But coming on to the here, you can see that the 40% of the teachers are unequipped, but for the special educators trainers, we don't have any available data right now that how equipped they are with the digital skills. And I hope that in our class today, in our session today, a lot of special educators who are sitting back there, and I hope you all guys are actually well equipped, well trained with all those ICT skills. You know how to conduct the Zoom session classes and online virtual platform classes. You will come to know some more interesting facts into the next slides. So when we address the barriers to education and relevant resources, so what we are seeing over here is like there are a lot of barriers for online learning, like lack of skilled manpower, recognition, internet availability, language barrier, technologically inefficiency, lack of awareness into the students, then OER or free contents are not available, then the cost and the digital payment, then disengaging course design, lack of skilled manpower. A lot of things are there when we are talking about the online learning platform. So government can improve these learning processes and outcome of a student with disability during a crisis such as COVID-19. How? Let's see. By assessing accommodations, by helping educators, parents, and individually students to assess each student's situation. So we as an educator can assess the student situation and discuss the adjustments needed for remote learning based upon their need. Some examples includes like while using alternative to print such as audio or other format instructions, as well as pictures, flexible scheduling and deadlines, and assistive technology. So these are the small facts or small tips. You can say that you can use the audio formats instead of giving them the printout. You can send them pictures. You can help them to get assistive technology as well. So we all know that the improvisation in delivering barriers to education and learning could be addressed in many ways. Let's see how many ways are there. So what we can do is like we can modify the curriculum and instructions. How we can do that? Let's see. So learning in a remote settings may differ from mainstream. We all know the classroom-based environment is completely different. You have a different ambience out there. But the same thing when converted into remote settings, the learning is a completely different. This includes like expectation from the students and the course methodology. So we don't know what's expectation individually expectation of our individual student, and we don't know what course methodology is actually well suited for those child, because we are dealing with the multiple students at a single time, and we cannot focus individually in each and every student. So that's the limitation over here. So the curriculum must often be adjusted based upon the community need. For example, Homework can be very simplified, allowing the students to dictate rather than type. So children can actually call the name of each student and just tell them like, this was your homework. I don't want you to type it, or I don't want you to show it. Instead, dictate to me what you have written, and provide them with a lot of audio materials which can be provided for reading assignments instead of giving them a piece of paper. Audio materials is more interesting, and I think child would definitely prefer to go with audio materials instead of an article. So there is another parameters over here which can also help in upcoming or uplifting the barriers here. It's like utilizing the universal design for learning. UDL is which aims to help teachers reach a wide variety of students, focusing on how a student can learn and demonstrate knowledge. So this is a very important aspect you can see. So effective networks, the why of learning. So how you can engage your child while doing an online in the online platform. So the child, the teacher should be equipped with those skills which can actually engage the child while conducting any sessions or lectures. So there we have to know that what is the why of learning. So we will see the why of learning, the what of learning, and the how of learning. And how this can be achieved is like the why of learning can be achieved by engaging the child, and the what of learning can be achieved by a representation. So you'll have to come with a lot of visual, audio representations to engage the child and to let them know what they are learning. And you have the teachers has to come up with a lot of actions and expressions rather than just giving them a note of assignment. They will have to express their views, and they should interact with the child individually based upon their requirement and act accordingly. This is very helpful for special educators. They can try with their students. Then we have a next parameters, which is a project based learnings. So we have to implement PBL into our curriculum, into our mainstream, or into our online platform education based training. So over here PBL sometimes like suggests studies which shows that the students with disabilities learn more by using research and analysis to complete a project rather than giving them a typical assignment. So project-based learning also improves self-esteem and promotes positive engagement. So we are talking about here to engage themselves. We're talking about here that these project-based learning should improvise their self-esteem. They should be more confident. Then only they will allow to interact. They will allow themselves to engage more onto these learning or project-based learning, especially. So both spatial and general education teachers are actually plays a vital role for these type of learnings. So these two uh, these two type of community is very important over here. I know there are a lot of special educators out there sitting into this seminar, and they must be listening to this. And what they need to do is like they need to design and introduce the assignments and make sure that everybody, each and every student should understand how to complete them. It doesn't mean like just give them an assignment and leave them onto their own. No, the special educators has to come up with certain inputs which actually encourages their students to understand that this is a task, this is a assignment which actually allows them to complete them in easy way. So some project-based learning parameters is like you have to come up with some driving questions or challenges for each student. Then you have to allow the child to publicly present the product. Feedbacks are very important. You'll have to keep on getting the feedback from the students. Even the teachers needs to get their feedback from their colleagues as well. Then, of course, 21st century skills, what we're talking about in the past slides, like you'll have to come up, you'll have to get yourself equipped with all those uh, new technologies, internet, and know how to deal all these sophisticated softwares out available there in the market. So what are the characteristics of the project-based learning activities over here? So like you will have to come up with a problem, a challenge, or a question. So at the root of all project-based learning activities, there is a question, there is a challenge or a problem. So this problem should provide sufficient level of challenge for the learner. So that's what mean a problem, a challenge, or a question. So the next is like skills for success, essential knowledge and understanding. So here, every project you integrate in your e-learning course should be centered on the learning goals and the skill sets that your learner needs to develop. They must also focus on self-management and critical thinking skills that help the learner to arrive at their own solution. And the next is the authenticity and relevance. So the project must include a real world problem. It should not be in the space. So it should include a real world problem or question that is relevant for your learner, as well as the tools and ideologies that you would encounter in a real world. It should not be like from the different part of space. So the authenticity and relevance means that it should really come up with the real world problem, okay? And it can also address a particular concern that the learner may have or challenge they face on a regular basis. So that's how they will come to practice onto this. The next characteristic is the freedom of choice, which is very important, very significant for students with disabilities. So those students must have the ability to make decisions autonomously throughout the e-learning project, such as which strategy they will use, what they produce, and their work process. The next is the self-reflection. After the e-learning project has concluded, the learners should be able to reflect upon the experience and their inquiry process, as well as the activities which is involved in the e-learning project and the challenges they faced while trying to reach a solution. I was talking about feedback. This is very important. So feedback, what is feedback? So learner must be able to give and receive feedback. Both are important. The learner should be able to give the feedback and receive the feedback, including the peer-based feedback. So they should get a peer feedback as well from their friends, teachers, the social context, whom so they are with in the surrounding, which is to expand their knowledge of subject matter and to continually improve their work process and how they presented their findings. So that's how feedback is very important. Then the last and but not the least is the public presentation. At the end of the e-learning project, the learners should publicly present their findings to their peers or in a public forum. They should not be able, they should be able not only to discuss their findings, but also how they arrived at the solution. So coming on to the next parameter is the ensuring individualized education program is being implemented. What is individualized education program? So you can see here that the IEP requires that the educators, teachers, parents, and their families, they work together. So we are talking about a holistic approach. We all know that rehabilitation is not a single team oriented. So we have to work all together in a group, which includes all educators, students, parents, and families, and they have to complete this all VC cycle over here, and which then only it can be effective for a remote learning settings, and that's how the best procedure with each student's education. So I will give you some tips for the parents, for the educators with the special needs. Over here, we can see the children with IEPs during the COVID-19 crisis. So what we see is the face-to-face is a very important interaction. Face-to-face interaction is an important key, is a vital parameter which plays an important role. So it is important for children with disabilities to have virtual face-to-face interactions with their teachers that could be using video. So using video will allow teachers to pick up verbal and physical cues and gauge their child's confidence and understanding during the online instructions. Then measuring understanding needs to be ongoing. which means that the measuring understanding, uh, the frequent surveys and online quizzes, chats, and these things should be there. So it's like you'll have to come up with some survey, some quizzes, some chatting activities online, like what we are doing over here in the chat box. Like if you have any question, you can put it in the chat box and we can immediately reply you back with the solution. So these things should be incorporated while teaching them online. Okay. So the frequent quizzes, chats, and other ways to check understanding will be particularly important when using distance learning method. Okay, so students need multiple ways to engage with their curriculum. So online information needs to be represented in different formats, and the students need options for engaging and demonstrating their understanding. So there are hallmarks of universal design for learning UDL, what we learned in the previous slide. Then encourage the teachers to integrate UDL into their online instructions. It's very important for you guys to incorporate these UDL and IEP into your online curriculum. So these things have plays a vital role when you are dealing with child with having a limited attention. They are not attention driven. Okay, so we have to support our teachers. Of course, teachers are very important. So as a school transition to online learning, so this transition was devastating for all of us. It is important to provide teachers with guidance and relevant evidence-based resources so that they can deliver the lessons in remote and online setting in a special education. So what you have to do is like you have to prepare your first session from home. So even like us, if we are coming up onto this Zoom session today, you'll have to prepare yourself whether for the very first time. Get yourself aware with the technology, whether it's Zoom or Teams or Skype, anything. Then what software you're using? It could be again Zoom and everything. And your environment is very important. Environment means like your surroundings should be airy, should be lighting so that the student can actually visualize your face in a more better way. Then the apparels and recommendations are very important. The teachers should come up with the very comfort apparels so that they can actually sit. So and they can engage their students with personality, passion, enthusiasm. So what we're telling is like engaging students online is different from engaging students with your physical presence in a classroom. It's a completely different. So online educators should be engaging from the get-go using enthusiastic body languages when you're conducting the session, expression, and the tone of voice. You should be very loud and clear. It is also important to have
Mr.
your,
Kashyap, Mr. Kashyap, can I interfere?
yeah, please.
Actually, could you sum up later on? Could you sum up a bit in Hindi also? I think participants are not
I
very in English.
I don't
So
mind to share my presentation with
yeah, you
everyone,
complete this.
participants.
You complete
Yeah.
this whenever you want. Okay, a few
Okay.
words.
I'll try to include some Hindi over here. It's like आप
Yeah,
जब भी
and one
अपने,
more thing,
yeah.
there are some scratches on the slide. I don't know
Well, I
who is
don't
doing
know.
this.
I don't know who is doing that.
Oh, that is what is very sad.
I think
Because
those.
participants cannot touch it, and from
Yeah.
our side also we are trying to check.
No, even from my side, if you can see, I'm putting the laser out there in the screen, but
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
nothing. I think Mr.
Anyway,
Tapas can look into this, like why it
yeah,
is
I've
coming.
asked him. I've asked him in the winter. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm
Okay,
remaining
please
with
keep on.
only two
Sorry to
slides.
interrupt.
I'm remaining with only two slides, and then I will
Yeah,
sum
you
up
say yes.
something. Yeah, then I will sum up something in Hindi
A bit in
for
Hindi. Yes.
all. Yeah, I'll sum up in Hindi in all those contexts. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Thank you. Thank you.
what I was telling over here is like all the spatial educators sitting out there in this session. So like I was telling, the enthusiastic body language is very important. Your expression is very important. Your tone of voice is very important. And it is also important to have your materials prepared beforehand in order to keep the pace moving forward and to avoid downtime while you search for the content. At the same time, everybody is learning and it is okay to make mistakes. So it's fine. You can do mistakes. No, not an issue. but you have to learn with your mistakes. So establishing your presence will signal to students that you are visible, available, and you will be welcoming them in a new learning environment. So what I was telling over here is like, remember that students may become nervous attending an online classes for the very first time, and you can ease their stress by an enthusiastic and optimistic attitude. So attitude is very important for special educators. So set clear expectations, provide the students with a very clear set of expectation upfront. These expectations should also include what they can expect for their class schedule, their modes of communication, and the frequency. So homework and activities are again very important. You can conduct the students' homework, and that should display online their homework, that what they have done. Then you have to create a supportive learning environment, build a trust in an online learning environment. Okay, so I won't say much over here. It's like, what is an apparel recommendation is like, you should come up with a very comfortable clothes sitting in front of Zoom classes. Wear a socks, warm socks if you want, or wear a shorts, trouser lower as a lower, because you're wearing shirt and that's only is visible into the Zoom classes. Now again, we have to give support to the family and caregivers as well. So here we can see that those children with special education needs and disabilities, they need an systematic approach, which is very necessary to help parents and caregivers with both of their domestic and responsibilities and students' education as well, because the family is responsible for a lot of other activities out there. I'll come up with the conclusion like, the above mentioned suggestions are just a tip of iceberg. There's nothing included. I have included nothing into my presentation. It was a very small presentation in my context. There could be a lot more in detail. So if you think like it is a collectively responsibility of गवर्नमेंट, हम टीचर्स की भी बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है यहाँ पे, पेरेंट्स की बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है, केयर गिवर्स की इम्पोर्टेंट रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है कि हम कैसे अपने एजुकेशन सिस्टम को अपलिफ्ट करें, किस तरीके से हम ऑनलाइन एजुकेशन जो हम करते हैं उसके अंदर किस तरीके से उसको हम इम्प्रोवाइज कर सकते हैं. So in order to ensure that the systematic long-term solutions are provided, all those factors that affect access to education, including policy, legislation, financing, human resources, and data, must be explored. And there I sum up my presentation, and I hope you guys have enjoyed it. And I think if you have any questions based on this presentation, you can text me personally on my email. Mr. Tapas will share you my email. If you have anything related with my presentation, you can share it with me. Thank you so much, guys. And here I sum up my presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Tapasji, and at last, I'm thanking you for inviting me onto this platform. And I think I have shared something useful for the special educators sitting out there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any questions?
That was a wonderful presentation. If anyone
you so
have
much.
any questions, you may ask.
Yeah, you can put it in the chat box, और आप चैट बॉक्स में आप अपना क्वेश्चंस को लिख सकते हैं, मैं
लिख सकते
आपको
हैं,
रिप्लाई
but
कर.
they can ask also. We have unmuted them. They can mute themselves and they can ask also, one or two of them.
Sir, राहुल सर.
थैंक यू सर.
सर आपका एक हम लोग फोटो ले लेंगे, प्लीज एक बार आपका फेस हम लोग को स्क्रीन में दिखाना चाहिए. एक बार आपका फोटो ले लेंगे.
आपको वीडियो ऑन कीजिए
थोड़ा वीडियो ऑन कर दीजिए.
हेलो.
हाँ सर.
आप लोग देख सकते हैं. हेलो.
Hi, we can see you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everybody.
सर आपका
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
अपना नहीं आ रहा है सर.
मेरा फोटो नहीं आ रहा है।
आपका सर पीपीटी
फोटो नहीं
कर दीजिए।
पीपीटी शेयर कर दो। ओके
अभी
ओके।
हाँ,
आ गया
अभी
सर।
अभी you can take the photo. Yeah.
सर चला गया
आप
फोटो।
आप मुझे पीपीटी वापस से प्ले करना चाहते हैं?
Thank you, sir.
आप देख सकते हैं।
Someone who talks only, his photo will be visual will be
If
seen.
someone wants to take a screenshot of this presentation,
हेलो।
Thank you, sir.
yeah, thank you so much. You're
Thank
most
you, sir.
welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Tapas sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.